case you thought it couldn't get any weirder, what I've done is I've actually left the battery out of the machine for a number of days. Now, realistically, you can just use the reset CMOS jumper and blank the BIOS, or you can take the battery out for, you know, a couple of minutes and it will blank it. But I'd taken it out since the last video and I just left it out, so it's been out for a couple of days. Put the battery back in, put the RAM back in, put a video card back in that I know is good, put in a SATA hard drive, and put in an IDE/ATA optical drive. Now the machine will still refuse to boot from any device, but if I actually go into the boot selection menu, select the hard drive, it'll then attempt to boot from the hard drive. Now we'll actually go ahead and do that, but obviously the operating system on this hard drive is from another machine, so it'll just basically keep on going in the loop because it can't, you know, fully, you know, it basically can't fully run the operating system. So what I'm going to try is I'm going to try and put a Windows disk into the optical drive, ask for a boot selection. I did this the last video. We're going to ask it the boot selection again, add it to boot from the CD-ROM drive, and see if it'll then read the disk in the CD-ROM drive. Okay, so just letting it run, it says boot from CD, then it comes up with disk boot failure, insert system disk, and press enter. Okay, to invoke the disk boot menu, you have to press the escape key. So I'm going to try that first and see if it lets me into it. Okay, here we are. This is the boot menu. See, you have a selection: floppy drive, LS120. What's that? Hard disk, CD-ROM, zip 100, USB FDD, USB zip, USB CD-ROM, legacy LAN, or nVidia boot edge. The LS120 is a forgotten format, in inverted commas, where basically it was a floppy drive and an optical drive at the same time, and it would actually have its own proprietary disks which contained 120 megabytes. The zip was the iOmega zip drive, and then USB basically is USB FDD for your, you know, external floppy drives, hard drives, etc., etc. So this particular machine has a couple of options to allow you to boot from different devices. So we're going to choose the CD-ROM drive. Unfortunately, this is as far as we actually get. It just point blank refuses to go any further. One of the things I did mention is that this machine seems to enjoy booting from a USB disk. So I'm going to actually get it to try and boot from a Windows 10 USB stick and see what happens. Now, you might have noticed it's actually on my car keys. So yeah, my USB stick is on my car case. Okay, so it's plugged in. This is a Windows 10 USB stick. So I'm going to turn off the machine, back on again, choose to boot from the USB stick. One thing I'm noticing is I've stopped myself from saying and ha, and instead I'm saying basically in every video. So I'm going to try to stop doing that as well from now. So basically I'm going to stop. In the BIOS setup, or the CMOS setup, we have a couple of options, and one of the options we have in here is for the boot devices. So you can choose which device to boot from first. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically, we're going to primarily change the option from first boot device of floppy, and we're going to change that to USB FDD. And second boot device, we'll make it the CD-ROM drive, and the third boot device, we'll make it the floppy drive, and final boot device, we'll make it the hard drive. Oh yeah, make the thing work. The first video card that came to hand was a Matrix, so we're going to use that, a Matrix MGA. Hey, so I'm going to put in the CD-ROM there. Oh, something come up there. There was a new error on the screen. It's actually on the boot flat screen. It disappeared before I could actually get a picture of it. Okay, so I'm going to just restart the computer again there. Hold on. Do a soft power. Hold on. There we are. Now, so I've changed it to a PCI graphics card because I figured maybe there's some fault with the AGP. Yeah, it's coming up with a weird graphics error on the screen there. This is getting more bizarre. Yeah, it's the same error. So basically it's just hanging on, press any key to boot from CD or DVD, and it just hangs there and does nothing. So I'll tell you what we're going to do next is we're going to put back in the AGP video card we just took out, and we're going to put in a SATA CD-ROM drive and see if that makes any difference. Okay, so the SATA drive hit the deck, but we'll ignore that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn on the machine again. We have a SATA optical drive, SATA hard drive. We've got our USB stick plugged in with our Windows 10. We can always change that later on to our Windows 7. I just want to see what will happen. I'll put a Windows 7 disk in here as well, and we'll just boot it up and see what goes on. The answer to the question is no. It made no sodden difference. It still doesn't boot. Wow, that's unreal. I wonder if I asked it to boot from a floppy disk would it make any difference. Okay, if this is your machine and this is giving you this much trouble, my advice would be to cease and desist and put this board out of its misery. Because there's something here wrong with the BIOS. There's some description. It must have gotten the shock from that AGP card in the machine. It must have damaged it in some shape or form. So okay, we went through the process here. Okay, we went through a few diagnostic procedures that in most cases would solve this particular issue. Because not everything is black and white. One of the first things, we're going to do a quick recap and end this video. That's basically end this board. One of the first things you do if you have a system that's hanging and crashing and won't boot in is to basically take out every drive. Disconnect the CD-ROM drive, disconnect the hard drive, disconnect anything that might be stuck in onto the motherboard, and then turn the machine on. See the machine still hangs in the same place or gives a different error. Once you've established that, then start plugging things back in. Start by plugging in the hard drive and see the machine then boots into Windows. If it does, it's probably your optical drive. Plug your optical drive back in, try it again. Maybe it boots into Windows then. If it does, maybe it's just a loose cable or a loose connection. One of the other things you can do for diagnostic purposes is to change out the system RAM. The system RAM can give trouble. Even though it might come up on an error when it's turning on or when the machine is diagnosing that RAM or doing its general checks, there may still be a fault with that RAM, so it's worth checking that out. So let's say now we've got a hard drive we know is working fine, optical drive we know is working fine, RAM is working fine. What do we check next? Next thing we check is the power supply. If the power supply is not giving the correct voltage to the motherboard or the correct voltage to some other component within the computer, it can also be a cause of grief within the machine. Again, it's one of those things that is not really written about or mentioned, but you know, it does happen. What else can be given grief? Well, strangely enough, the keyboard or the mouse can do it. So disconnect the keyboard or the mouse. We haven't done it in this video, but you know, I know this keyboard and mouse works in every other machine I plug it into, but it could still be unique to this machine. An example would be where I had the computer, I've mentioned this in the previous video, where the two computers would work with the monitors belongs to each other's machine, but not with the monitor that came with them. Why was that? I don't know. Plug and play? Not too sure. Some sort of detection on the monitor? Again, don't know. But when I swapped the monitors over, both machines booted up. I actually rang both customers and said, your machine is the fault with the monitor, but I have a solution. I'm going to swap your monitor with the other customer. Let me ring them up first and make sure they're okay with that. Both were, luckily enough, so both had new machines. So let's say they weren't happy with that, what would I have done? Well, I would have suggested changing the monitor. And I only discovered that by pure accident. It's not one of those things that will be listed. It would be probably suggested that the video card was faulty. So they could have very well been sold a new video card. That could have solved their problem. But they would have then spent money. Whereas changing the monitor over, they spent nothing. So it's worth checking everything if the machine is worth saving. If the machine isn't worth saving, or it's cost prohibitive to go through all these checks, it's probably best just to leave it be. So in other words, if the machine is going to cost time, which is money, then it's not really worth going ahead and doing that. For example, one of the suggestions is with the A+ is to go ahead and take these cables out of this particular power supply and test each one for the correct voltage. Well, that's a good thing to do. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But if you go ahead and do that, you're spending more time. Whereas what's the best thing to do would be to actually take a brand new power supply out of a pack, plug it into the motherboard. Is it now running? It is. Bang. It's the power supply. Put the power supply to one side and test it at another stage when you've got some free time. It's best not to, you know, go ahead and, you know, linger on these things. What else can cause trouble are not so much the SATA cables. They tend to be pretty robust, I find, but again, it can be as simple as an SATA cable given fault. So check the cable for breaks or cuts. If there's breaks or cuts on the SATA cable, change the cable, because that can be causing these glitches. Trust me. What else can be causing trouble? The old ATA cables. These cables are designed to be plugged in once and taken out once and then thrown away. Would you believe that? Yeah. So when you plug in an ATA cable back in an old PC, it was designed to be plugged in onto the motherboard, into the hard drive, and that was to basically live, be born, live and die with that machine. So if you were going to, you know, replace the hard drive of the machine, have a guess what? You replace the cable with it, because they were designed to be one use only. That's something a professional said to me back when I was starting off, and I've went ahead and I've used cables on many different machines, especially the older type connection 80 cables. These older type 40 cables can actually come apart down here. This can cause interference. Again, it's worth changing the cable. It is the fault. If it's an older machine, older vintage machine you're trying to save, it's worth checking that cable out. Why not change it for a conductor 80 cable? They're a better cable anyway, and they're going to give you less errors and less data loss. So it's worth changing it out. Again, one of the simplest problems on a board where it's the checksum error is the system battery. So change the system battery. Regardless, if you get this error on your machine, take out that system battery and change it. It's worth doing it, you know, because it's only a euro or €2 part. Do it. It's the first thing you should try. So the battery will be your priority number one. So anyway, thanks for watching. I'll keep this motherboard for the moment regardless. And as I said in the last video, I think I was talking about scrapping it. I'm very tempted to be like the angry guitarist and smash it to little bits, but I'm still curious as to what could be causing the problem and where it could be. Unfortunately, the actual BIOS chip is soldered or soldered onto the board, so I can't really take it out. If I could, I would take that out of there and put in a brand new one. You might find that the problem is solved. Like I said, it could be a shock that went down there and shocked that. The AGP video card did go bang inside this machine. So, like I said, that could be where the problem is. There could be a trace somewhere on the board I don't know, but that's basically busted or broken. I don't know. The capacitors look good in the motherboard, so it doesn't seem to be anything of any of them. But again, it could be one of them. It could be one of them given the fault. But do I want to go ahead and test and check and take each one of them out? Not really, but you could if you really want to go down that route. But for the moment, I'll hold on to it and I'll see if I can think of anything else that could be possibly giving trouble. And that's basically it. So I appreciate this has been 15 minutes of your time. I've watched the video for this far. I'd like to say thanks very much, and thanks for watching. Please, you know, thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you don't like the video, and any information you want to pass on to me or any tips or advice, leave them down below, and I'll take them into consideration. If I've already tried it, well, I've already tried it. If I haven't, I'll give it a lash in the next video, if I do another video on this motherboard. Until then, thank you, bye bye.